The Hedley Bull Prize in International Relations is awarded to the best book in international relations, selected by the jury panel. The prize is open to social science scholars from any ECPR member institution working in the discipline of international relations. The work must be a published monograph, and entries must be published in the 2 years before the year of the award. This year, the jury members for the selection of the Hedley Bull Prize are the following: Gazim Vizoka from Dublin City University and a member of the Standing Group on Critical Peace and Conflict Studies; Brian E. Jones, University of Warwick, and a member of the Standing Group on Human Rights and International Justice; Daniela Herrera, University of Catania, and a member of the Standing Group on International Relations; James Patterson, University of Manchester, and the Standing Group on International Political Theory; Dirk de Bievre, University of Antwerp, Standing Group on International Relations, and myself. The ECPR 2021 Hedley Bull Prize in International Relations is awarded to Lora Anne Viola for her book, The Closure of the International System: How Institutions Create Political Equalities and Hierarchies, and the book is published by Cambridge University Press. The book provides an in-depth examination of the nature of the global governance system, focusing on the disparity between the UN Charter's commitment to sovereign equality and the practice of global politics by a few large states with lead responsibility. Viola contests the established view of the hierarchical global system and suggests that there are multiple forms of hierarchy and deeply entrenched structures of dominance, all of which can be seen in the way international institutions operate in the allocation of rights and responsibilities. The increase in the number of states throughout the 20th century expanded the size of the United Nations, posing the challenge of how to balance demands for greater inclusion and sovereign equality against the incentives for exclusion and hierarchy. Yet the principle of sovereign equality, enshrined in the UN Charter, translates into distinct and varied practices by the member states in pursuit of their respective individual national interests. Viola develops an argument of institutional logic to explain why greater inclusiveness creates incentives to distribute authority less equally. The Closure Thesis involves a process of drawing boundaries and building communities to monopolize scarce resources for the insider group and to exclude others from gaining access. Sovereign state members exercise their formal political right of participation in the institutions of global governance, and at the same time enjoy procedural rights where they can use their voice in institutional decision-making. Once inside the club, states tend to shape the institutional arrangements and rules in order to maintain their influence, and thus new relations of stratification arise among the insiders. The jury praised the book for the outstanding account of statehood and international organizations, and the global perspective and multiple themes that resonated with the legacy of Hedley Bull, while retaining a contemporary relevance for students of global governance. The panel acknowledged the book's innovative approach towards the core idea of war and peace as mutually constitutive, and the comprehensive approach adopted by the author to take account of institutions, states, and different actors in the global governance system. Let me now hand over to Anna Holzscheiter to speak on why the award was made to Lora Viola.
Thank you very much, Mary. So I'm Anna Holzscheiter. I'm a professor of political science and international politics at a Technical University Dresden, and I'm also leading a research group on governance for global health at the WZB, the Berlin Social Science Center. I have known Lora for a very long time, ever since our paths crossed for the first time in 2001, when we were both in the initial phases of our doctorates and presenting our work at the PhD colloquium of Thomas Risse at Freie Universität Berlin. And at that time, as I was a real greenhorn in academia and quite terrified about presenting my research to others, I remember that even then I was deeply impressed by the intellectual and academic maturity with which Lora presented herself, her ideas, and her PhD research. And over and above that, also her independent thinking and her constructive and very productive engagement with the work of others. So we've both come a long way since then, and we remain both in academia, chasing after the rare tenured professorships in Germany. And that means our paths continue to cross at Freie Universität Berlin, where I worked for some time at WZB and of course at national and international conferences. When I received the news that Lora had been indeed awarded the ECPR Hedley Bull Prize, I was, of course, very happy and at the same time somehow not very surprised. And at least I had thought that of all books published recently, the Closure of the International System actually should receive that award. And that's, of course, also why I nominated her. The first reason for the nomination was that the book directly engages with the expansion thesis that is most associated with Hedley Bull and Adam Watson's The Expansion of International Society. But of course, tying in with the Hedley Bull's legacy is not enough of a reason for being awarded the Hedley Bull Prize. So I've come to know Lora as a scholar whose contributions, particularly on historical institutional thought, have been exceptional and groundbreaking, and whose embracing of long-term historical perspectives that span not only recent history, but several centuries, have always resulted in cutting-edge theories on inequality and hierarchy in international institutions, and also on the ways in which they stand in the way of institutional transformation. My own work revolves around the inclusion and exclusion of non-state actors in international politics, where the reality I study is frequently at odds with theories that focus, in my view, too much on increased access, diversity, and plurality in international politics, and thereby turn a blind eye on exclusion and closure. And it's for that reason that I found her theory on the link between norms and rules that legitimize the inclusion-exclusion of actors and the resulting tensions between demands for equality and incentives for hierarchy most stimulating. Lora's book, in my view, is an exceptional piece of original academic thinking. It is, beyond that, a compelling read, and it's extremely well written and argued. It engages as much with the history of ideas in international relations as it addresses contemporary questions of institutional inequality and the possibilities and also impossibilities of international institutions to adapt to changing constellations of power in international politics. In sum, I'm confident that this book will be an inevitable stimulating read to any scholar of international relations, and it will shape our future debates on international institutions. And I now hand over to Lora herself, the winner of the Hedley Bull Prize 2021.
Thank you so much, Anna and Mary, and to ECPR and the whole committee. And also thank you to everyone who contributed to this book and to this honor of receiving the award. It truly is an honor to be receiving it. And it's an honor, first of all, because it is such a pleasure as an author to realize that the arguments are well received and that the book can make a contribution to current debates. But to receive the Hedley Bull Prize in particular is especially meaningful, as Anna already noted, because the closure of the international system is in some way in direct conversation with Bull's own work. And I think that it's also a testament to the ongoing influence of Bull's scholarship and the inspiration that it can lend to new ways of thinking about international relations. So the title of my book, The Closure of the International System, is a play on, but also a critique of the expansion thesis. And the expansion thesis is, I think, most closely associated with Hedley Bull and Adam Watson's book, The Expansion of International Society. But I would also argue that the expansion thesis is widely present in the IR literature across all theoretical traditions. And the expansion thesis, very simply put, is the idea that the globalization of the international system has been a process of international institutions expanding, opening up, and generally becoming more inclusive and democratic over time. And in contrast to this expansion thesis, my book develops what I call the closure thesis. And the closure thesis is based on Max Weber's idea of social closure and also on the economic idea of club goods. And what the Closure Thesis argues is that the history of the modern international system is a series of institutional closures, or at least this is another perspective through which we can understand the international system's development over time. A series of institutional closures in which institutions, in particular diplomacy, international law, and international organizations, make rules to legitimate the inclusion of some actors and the exclusion of others. Now, of course, the international system and its institutions have expanded in a certain sense in terms of the number of sovereign states today, in terms of the geographic scope of the member states of international organizations, also in terms of the types of actors that are important today, like international organizations themselves or NGOs, private firms, but also individuals. But what I suggest is that whether we see this as truly expansive and pluralistic depends on the reference point that we take. And if we consider, in the first instance, all of the potential political agents in the world as possible subjects of international law or members of international institutions, then our current institutions do look decidedly narrow. And I think that if we look at the long arc of history, as I try to do in the book, international institutions have purposely been used to limit who belongs and also with what rights do they get to belong. And in my view, this helps to understand the equal or unequal distribution of political rights that we observe empirically in the international system. So the book develops an argument to explain how the distribution of political equality and inequalities, on the first hand, mutually constituted through institutions. Every decision about inclusion requires an understanding about who will be left out, but also how political equality and inequality are causally related, how more of one kind of political equality creates incentives for the institutionalization of other kinds of political inequality. At the end of the day, what I'm most interested in is the ways in which equalities and hierarchies persistently coexist. So a lot of the literature today, I think, recognizes the democratization of international institutions, and another literature focuses on the ways in which hierarchies still persist. But what I think is really interesting and puzzling, and also really consequential for politics today, is how both dynamics coexist and how those dynamics are interrelated. So I'd like to thank once again ECPR and the committee for recognizing this book and for honoring the kinds of contributions that the book tries to make to a critical reassessment of the notion of expansion, but also the idea of how political rights and political authority are distributed in the international system.